The elevator doors slid open with a soft mechanical sigh, and the selected 24 stepped out one by one onto the velvet black carpet. Each bore the same lanyard silver badge, black ribbon, minimalist logo of Voss Industries gleaming under. The recessed lights. Beyond the glass corridor stood the entrance to Dominic Voss's private auditorium. They had all seen pictures of it online. None of them thought they'd ever stand here in person. They came from all walks of life. A Harvard professor, a former monk from Nepal, a viral TikTok poet, a blind pianist, a startup founder whose company had crashed and burned in 3 months, a hedge fund tycoon who once made 60 million in a week. They stood beside one another like exhibits in a museum of ambition, adjusting ties, shifting dresses, holding breaths. Security was polite, but unyielding. Phones were taken, watches too. One word meant no distractions. No cheats. Inside the dim-lit auditorium, silence pressed down like fog. Every seat was empty except one. Dominic sat center row, alone, still as stone, the collar of his black shirt unbuttoned by a single notch, just enough to imply comfort, not weakness. His eyes scanned the stage as the first name was called. A spotlight flared. A woman with tight braids and trembling hands stepped forward. She had won a Pulitzer for journalism. Today, her lips parted, then froze. Her voice didn't come. She looked into the darkness, saw Dominic's piercing gaze, and heard the ticking clock in her mind. Your word? The voice over the speaker. Prompted, soft and measured. 10 seconds. 9.8. Her lips finally parted. Compassion. A pause. Then a simple response from Dominic, razor sharp and quiet. Dismissed. She left without another word. No music, no applause. The second contestant approached. A motivational speaker with millions of followers. He wore designer shoes and held his head high. Faith, he declared. Loud and bold. Dominic didn't blink. Dismissed. Third. Fourth. Fifth. They tried everything: hope, service, purpose, legacy, love. Each word met with the same sentence. Dismissed. Tension escalated like a tightening wire. No explanation, no feedback. Just that cold final word. The audience beyond the cameras watching live were riveted. Hashtags trended by the minute. Psychologists broke down Dominic's expressions frame by frame. What was he looking for? What hadn't he heard yet? At number 12, someone shouted, "Truth!" With defiance, Dominic raised an eyebrow, leaned forward slightly. Then, dismissed. By number 17, nerves were frayed. One contestant tried to break the rule. "Can I explain mine?" "No," Dominic said. "You already failed." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Each rejection was like a judge slamming. A gavel in your mind. Finally, number 24 approached. An elderly woman with a silver streak in her hair and trembling hands. A Holocaust survivor, a poet laureate. She had been silent until now. She climbed the stairs slowly, held the microphone tightly, and whispered, "Memory." Dominic's expression changed just a fraction. He looked away. Then back. His voice was lower than before. Dismissed. And that was it. All 24 had failed. The cameras faded out. The doors reopened. The broadcast was over. But Dominic didn't leave. He remained in his seat long after the auditorium. Emptied. Still. Unmoving. Unsatisfied. He had thought someone would have it. Thought perhaps he'd find it after all these years. That one word that defined what he had lost. That one word that would unlock the buried thing inside him he couldn't name, but none had come close. And outside, under the glow of a flickering street lamp across from the tower, a girl in second-hand shoes held a scrap of paper tightly to her chest. It wasn't a ticket, but she believed it was, because it had her mother's handwriting on the back, and her mother had said, "When he asks his question, Mia, you will know what to say." The elevator doors slid open with a soft mechanical sigh, and the selected 24 stepped out one by one onto the velvet black carpet. Each bore the same lanyard silver badge, black ribbon, minimalist logo of Voss Industries gleaming under. The recessed lights. Beyond the glass corridor stood the entrance to Dominic Voss's private auditorium. They had all seen pictures of it online. None of them thought they'd ever stand here in person. They came from all walks of life. A Harvard professor, a former monk from Nepal, a viral TikTok poet, a blind pianist, a startup founder whose company had crashed and burned in 3 months, a hedge fund tycoon who once made $60 million in a week. They stood beside one another like exhibits in a museum of ambition, adjusting ties, shifting dresses, holding breaths. Security was polite but unyielding. Phones were taken, watches too. One word meant no distractions. No cheats. Inside the dim-lit auditorium, silence pressed down like fog. Every seat was empty except one. Dominic sat center row, alone, still as stone, the collar of his black shirt unbuttoned by a single notch, just enough to imply comfort, not weakness. His eyes scanned the stage as the first name was called. A spotlight flared. A woman with tight braids and trembling hands stepped forward. She had won a Pulitzer for journalism. Today, her lips parted then froze. Her voice didn't come. She looked into the darkness, saw Dominic's piercing gaze, and heard the ticking clock in her mind. Your word? The voice over the speaker. Prompted, soft and measured. 10 seconds. 9.8. Her lips finally parted. Compassion. A pause. Then a simple response from Dominic, razor sharp and quiet. Dismissed. She left without another word. No music, no applause. The second contestant approached. A motivational speaker with millions of followers. He wore designer shoes and held his head high. Faith, he declared, loud and bold. Dominic didn't blink. Dismissed. Third. Fourth. Fifth. They tried everything: hope, service, purpose, legacy, love. Each word met with the same sentence. Dismissed. Tension escalated like a tightening wire. No explanation, no feedback. Just that cold final word. The audience beyond the cameras watching live were riveted. Hashtags trended by the minute. Psychologists broke down Dominic's expressions frame by frame. What was he looking for? What hadn't he heard yet? At number 12, someone shouted, "Truth!" With defiance. Dominic raised an eyebrow, leaned forward slightly. Then, dismissed. By number 17, nerves were frayed. One contestant tried to break the rule. "Can I explain mine?" "No," Dominic said. "You already failed." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Each rejection was like a judge slamming. A gavel in your mind. Finally, number 24 approached. An elderly woman with a silver streak in her hair and trembling hands. A Holocaust survivor, a poet laureate. She had been silent until now. She climbed the stairs slowly, held the microphone tightly, and whispered, "Memory." Dominic's expression changed just a fraction. He looked away. Then back. His voice was lower than before. Dismissed. And that was it. All 24 had failed. The cameras faded out. The doors reopened. The broadcast was over. But Dominic didn't leave. He remained in his seat long after the auditorium. Emptied. Still. Unmoving. Unsatisfied. He had thought someone would have it. Thought perhaps he'd find it after all these years. That one word that defined what he had lost. That one word that would unlock the buried thing inside him he couldn't name. But none had come close. And outside, under the glow of a flickering street lamp across from the tower, a girl in second-hand shoes held a scrap of paper tightly to her chest. It wasn't a ticket, but she believed it was, because it had her mother's handwriting on the back. And her mother had said, "When he asks his question, Mia, you will know what to say." The wind outside the Voss Industries tower carried the scent of rain and diesel and something quieter, like forgotten stories lingering between cracks in the concrete. A small girl in an oversized hoodie stood across the street, her eyes locked on the building's shimmering facade. She didn't blink when a limousine hissed past. She didn't flinch when the tower's massive digital billboard began replaying clips of the event. 24 voices. The ad declared in a smooth baritone. 24 answers, but still, no truth. Mia watched the replay as if it were an ancient prophecy unfolding on stone. One after another, the brilliant, the bold, the famous all dismissed with a single flick of Dominic Voss's tongue. Her grip tightened on the paper in her hands. It was no longer just a crumpled flyer, it was a promise. Not one she made, but one she was chosen to fulfill. The night deepened. The city was beginning to forget, but Mia stepped forward. She crossed the street with steady steps, worn sneakers barely making a sound. The revolving door spun for a group of executives leaving late. No one noticed the small figure slip in behind them, her shadow long under the golden lobby light. The security guard at the front desk was busy scanning badges when she approached. His nameplate read Frank. He didn't look up at first. "Hey, sweetheart." "Building's closed for visitors," he mumbled. "I'm not a visitor," Mia said. Frank blinked. "You're not?" "I'm supposed to be here," she added, pulling out the flyer and holding it up. Then she flipped it around. Written in faint, looping cursive were the words, "When the world fails to answer, only the forgotten will carry the truth." Frank frowned. "Where did you get this?" "From my mom. She worked for Mr. Voss a long time ago." "What's your name?" "Mia." He reached for the intercom. "I'm gonna need clearance." But before he could finish, a woman's voice spoke from behind him. "Let her through." Claudia Voss single quotes as assistant. She stepped forward, heels clicking softly on the marble. Her expression was unreadable. Sharp eyes, tighter lips. But there was a pause, just a beat, when she looked at Mia's face. Something flickered there. A memory, maybe. "She has no credentials," Frank said. "She doesn't need any," Claudia replied. And just like that, the gates opened. Mia stepped onto the elevator beside Claudia. Inside, there were no buttons, just a single touch screen. "You're not scared," Claudia said after a long silence. "Why would I be? You're about to stand in front of a man who destroyed people 3 times your size." "He didn't destroy them," Mia said softly. "They just didn't remember." Claudia turned her head sharply. "Remember what?" Mia didn't answer. The elevator chimed. Below the tower, a private floor slid open like a vault door, revealing the auditorium once again empty now. Cold, waiting. But not for long. Inside, Dominic Voss still sat in the same chair as before, surrounded by silence that even money couldn't buy. His eyes rose slowly as the doors parted. His expression was unreadable until he saw the girl step forward from the shadows. He leaned forward, hands steepled, breath held, for the first time that night. He looked surprised. Mia walked down the aisle without fear, without fanfare. Clutching the flyer like scripture, he watched her approach with the same scrutiny he had given presidents and kings. But something in his eyes cracked. It wasn't recognition. It was something worse. Doubt. "You're not supposed to be here," he said finally. "I am," Mia replied. "This is a game for thinkers, adults, people who've earned the right to answer." "Then you shouldn't have left the question lying in the street," she said, lifting the flyer. Dominic blinked. Silence. "You think you have the answer?" he asked, voice colder now. Mia nodded. Double quotes, "Then speak." She stepped up to the microphone that had silenced the brilliant and the brave. Her hands trembled now, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment pressing into her chest, like a memory too large for her body. She closed her eyes, breathed once, and waited for the 10 seconds to begin. 9, 8, 7. And then, with a voice that broke through the bone and glass and arrogance of the room, Mia whispered her word. It was not loud. But it shook something that had not moved inside Dominic Voss in for the years. And for the first time, in his empire of wealth and intellect, he had no idea what to say. The word Mia spoke didn't echo in the chamber, not the way Dominic Voss expected. It didn't rise like applause or fall like failure. It simply hung there, still and unbearable, as if it had always been waiting inside the air, dormant and unclaimed. His lips parted slightly. But no sound came. His mind, a thing that moved faster than most machines, froze. Not because it didn't recognize the word, but because it did. Too well, too personally. A dozen spotlights dimmed at once, controlled by unseen hands in a back room. The auditorium sank into a cold hush. Cameras still rolled, but no one dared cut the feed. The production crew watched through the control room window, stunned. Some leaned forward, others sat back. One man simply stood with his hand over his mouth. Dominic Voss, whose voice had never faltered in front of a prime minister, whose certainty had survived the crash of '09, a Senate hearing, was mute. Across the room, Mia held her gaze. She didn't fidget, didn't blink. It wasn't defiance that she wore on her face. It was understanding. As if she didn't come to fight him, but to find him. Finally, after what felt like an hour inside a moment, Dominic spoke. Why? That word? His voice cracked. Mia didn't answer, not at first. She let the silence stretch just long enough for the cameras to pick up the shift in him, the drop of his shoulders, the flicker in his eyes. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the thing she'd carried across city buses, alleys, and shelter lines. A locket. Tarnished silver. Simple. Unimpressive. Unless you knew what was inside. She walked forward, slowly, past the circle of light meant for the contestant, right into the no-go zone beyond the microphone. Security stirred. Claudia stood in the back, hand tensed at her side. But Dominic raised a hand barely, and they all froze. Mia climbed the steps to the stage. It was the first time anyone had dared approach him like this since the challenge began. But she wasn't performing. She was returning something. She held out the locket in both hands. Dominic stared at it, and for a split second, his entire body leaned back as if struck. He knew it. Before she opened it, before she even said the name, he knew. The girl in the photo was younger than, barely 20, wearing a uniform with a Voss Estate badge and a warm, too kind smile. And beside her, a much younger Dominic. No suit, no power, no edge, just a boy with wide, frightened eyes, and a sandwich in his hand. You forgot her, Mia said quietly. I didn't. Dominic began, but the words stuck. He looked up at her and whispered the name like a confession he hadn't said in decades. Rosa. Mia nodded. My mother. He closed his eyes. She used to call you her little lion, Mia continued. She said you were all thorns, until someone needed protecting. Then you were fire. A sound escaped Dominic's throat, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. Something in between. She told me stories about you when the wind came through the shelter windows, Mia said. About how you used to draw rocket ships and tape them to the ceiling. About how you'd cry when she made soup, but eat every drop. Dominic's fingers closed around the locket. She remembered every little thing, Mia said, softer now. But you didn't remember her. He looked up. And saw it. Her eyes. They weren't just familiar, they were a mirror. The shape of the jaw, the tilt of the head, the stubbornness that refused to bow. Rosa's child. His voice returned like an echo underwater. She said I'd forget her? No, Mia said, eyes shining but strong. She said you'd try to forget. But you couldn't. Dominic swallowed hard. His hand gripped the armrest like he might float away without something anchoring him. Why now? He asked, not to Mia but to the universe. Because now you're finally listening. Mia said. The crew upstairs didn't breathe. One whispered, cut the feed. But no one moved. A billionaire was crumbling live on camera, and a girl who had nothing had just returned. The most expensive memory in the world. The word she had spoken, remember, was not a guess. It was not poetic. It was not clever. It was a key. And it had just unlocked a door Dominic Voss had welded shut decades ago. But behind that door was everything he lost and everything he still had a chance to become. The cameras were still rolling, but no one behind the glass walls of the control room moved to stop them. Not the director, not the assistants, not the senior producer. Not even the tech who usually barked time codes and cued commercial breaks. This wasn't a show anymore. It was something else entirely. Something sacred. A billionaire was unraveling in real time, not because of scandal or scandalous proof, but because a little girl with tired shoes and a paper heart had spoken one word that made him human again. Mia stood on the stage, barely reaching Dominic Voss's chest, but in that moment, she was the tallest person in the room. The auditorium, built for spectacle, had become a church made of silence. Dominic's hands trembled as they closed around the locket. For 30 years, he had buried Rosa. Not her memory, no, that had haunted him in dreams and in flashes of guilt he never dared name. What he buried was the feeling. The love, the part of him that still belonged to someone who once kissed his forehead and called him a lion. When he was only a boy in a second-hand coat, he had locked it away the day he chose power over people. And now the key had walked in, carrying a piece of the woman who once believed in him before he even believed in himself. Mia said nothing. She didn't need to. That was the most terrifying part of all. She never raised her voice. Never demanded anything. Her stillness was the scream. Her presence was the judgment. And Dominic couldn't run from it. He stood up. No one had seen him stand like that before, not even during press conferences or boardroom victories. It wasn't pride. It wasn't command. It was surrender. He stepped off the stage, still, holding the locket, and turned to the cameras that had followed him for years, idolized him, projected him across nations as a symbol of self-made power. Cut the feed, he said. But no one did. So he looked into the lens, directly. For the first time in his career, he didn't speak like a CEO or a mogul. He spoke like a man. I created this challenge because I wanted to prove something, he said. I told myself it was about truth, about pushing people. But the truth is, I just wanted to hear something that would make me feel again. His voice cracked, and the only person who gave me that was a child I forgot. He looked at Mia, then back at the camera. Her name is Mia. Her mother's name was Rosa. She raised me when no one else would, and I repaid her with silence. His hands curled around the locket like it might burn him. So now I give up the game. He turned back to Mia, knees slowly bending until he was eye level with her. This man who had bent nations and silenced rooms bowed his head in front of a girl who had nothing but memory in her voice. I'm sorry, he whispered. I don't deserve to say it, but I am. Mia looked at him for a long time, and then, quietly, she reached out and placed something in his hand. It was a folded letter, creased, yellowed, written in blue ink. She wrote this for you, Mia said, but she never sent it. She said you weren't ready. Dominic unfolded it with trembling fingers. The paper was fragile, like it might crumble under the weight of what was written inside. Dear Dominic, if you ever remember me, I hope it's not because someone forced you to. I hope it's because something inside you still believes in good things, in second chances, in the small kind of love that never asks for anything back. I don't need your money. I never did. I just needed you to grow up into the boy I saw when you cried over lost books and cold nights. The boy who swore he'd build rocket ships and bring the rest of us with him. I hope you still carry that boy somewhere. Love, Rosa. By the time he finished reading, Dominic wasn't standing anymore. He had sunk to the floor. The auditorium was quiet, but the city wasn't. Outside, the clip had gone viral within minutes. Billionaire brought to his knees by a child's word. The girl who ended the game. What Mia said will haunt you. And as the headlines flew, Dominic Voss sat cross-legged on the stage floor, Eyes full of water he never let fall, and asked the only question left worth asking. What do I do now? Mia's answer came not in another speech or gesture, just a simple, steady voice. You remember her out loud. And that, for Dominic Voss, was the beginning of everything. The morning after the word that broke him, Dominic Voss did not return to his penthouse. He did not go to the office. He did not answer the board's calls, nor the 11 media agencies begging for exclusives, nor the internal PR team frantically drafting narratives to spin what had happened into something digestible. Instead, for the first time in nearly 3 decades, Dominic Voss took the elevator to sublevel 1 of his tower, where he kept the archives no one remembered. Not even the architects. A basement of forgotten blueprints, unopened letters, unopened regrets. He stood in the cold fluorescent light of that metal-lined vault, surrounded by file boxes marked with labels no longer relevant. Voss Phase 1, Rosa Records, Foster Case, Childhood Photos, and something else tucked in the corner like a ghost trying to disappear. Box 137, Returns, unopened. His hands hovered. It was the box he had ordered stored, untouched, years ago. The one that arrived every few months, always in the same careful script, always from the same return address, always from her. He never read them. He told himself he didn't need to. What could she possibly say that would matter now? But as his fingers traced the edges of the cardboard, as he slowly peeled the tape and opened the lid, the air shifted. It wasn't just dust and paper inside. It was the weight of time collapsing. Inside were letters. 18 in total. Each one neatly folded, dated, stamped, from a different season of his life. From a woman who remembered him even when he no longer did, and now she was gone, except she wasn't, because her daughter, their daughter, he realized now, had brought her back with one word that shattered the glass fortress around his soul. Dominic sank into a folding chair and read them all. It took him hours. Some letters were full of joy, others filled with pain. One described the night Mia was born in a rainstorm. Another talked about a children's hospital visit. Another, barely legible, described the moment Rosa realized she wouldn't survive the winter. But they all ended the same way. I hope you're still building something. Even if it's not rockets. Build something real. Something good. He read that final line over and over, and when he looked up, his reflection in the glass wall of the archive didn't look like Dominic Voss, tech emperor. He looked like the boy in the photo, the one with crooked teeth and wonder in his eyes. He stood. And for the first time in his empire's history, he did something completely unstrategic. He called a press conference, not in a rented ballroom or a branded hall, but in the street. In front of the shelter where Rosa once slept. Journalists were stunned. They had never seen him like this, dressed in a simple black sweater, no suit, no watch, no entourage. Just him. And Mia. Standing beside him in her patched hoodie, clutching his hand, not like a child clinging for safety, but like a compass keeping him from drifting again. The cameras rolled. And Dominic stepped to the microphone. His voice was not loud. But it didn't need to be. Yesterday, he said, I asked the world what gives a person true value. A pause. The crowd leaned closer, and a little girl gave me the answer in one word. He looked down at Mia, then out at the crowd. Remember. He let the silence breathe, then continued. We live in a world where we forget too easily, not just names and faces, but sacrifices. Kindness, the people who built us, raised us, loved us before we had anything to offer. His voice cracked. My name is Dominic Voss. I built towers, companies, technologies. But last night I was reminded that none of it matters if no one remembers who you really are. He took a breath. So, today I'm building something else. He turned, pointed to the brick shelter behind him, starting with this. Murmurs. This building will become the first of many. A network of shelters for single parents and children. Every one of them named after someone we've forgotten. Reporters scrambled to write. Hashtags exploded, but Dominic kept speaking. We'll call it the Rosa Foundation. And it won't be about donations, it will be about dignity. He looked into the lens of the camera directly, because people don't lose their value when they lose their home. They don't lose their worth when they fall behind. They are not disposable. He paused. They are unforgettable. He stepped. Back. The crowd erupted, not with applause, but with silence. That rare kind of silence that only happens when people feel something too big to speak. A city held its breath, and in the middle of it all, Mia looked up at Dominic, not with awe, not with worship, but with something far more powerful. Forgiveness. Not because he had earned it yet, but because she was giving it. And in that moment, for the first time in his empire's long reign, Dominic Voss felt truly human, and that was more valuable than $1 billion ever could be. The night of the press conference, the world turned. Not in the literal sense. Of course, the city lights still burned. Traffic still surged. Headlines still flickered across screens. But something invisible shifted like a current beneath the surface of a glassy ocean. For years, Dominic Voss had been a symbol, not a man, a monument, a myth, a machine wrapped in flesh and strategy. He was used to controlling narratives like puppets on strings. Stock markets rose and fell with his breath. Governments bent for his signature. Universities begged for his funding. He had spent his life teaching the world that value could be measured in power, intellect, speed, and profit. But in one day, one word, he lost control and gained something else. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he walked. No car, no driver, no destination. Just his feet and the echo of Mia's word in his chest like a forgotten lullaby. He walked until he stood in front of his childhood home. Except it wasn't a home anymore. The building had been condemned, the windows boarded, the paint peeled away like dead skin. But he recognized it instantly. The corner where Rosa used to wait for him after school. The alley where he got beat up for wearing a hand-me-down coat. The stoop where he once told her he would become so rich they'd all shut up forever. And she'd smiled, brushed his hair back and said, "Don't become rich so they shut up. Become someone so kind, they listen." He never forgot that smile. He just buried it. A voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Dominic?" He turned. A woman in a janitor's uniform stood nearby, holding a garbage bag, eyebrows furrowed. "You're him, right? The billionaire guy?" He nodded slowly. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you here?" Dominic looked at the building. "This was where I lost something." "Looks like you lost a lot," she said with no malice, only truth. He offered her a soft smile. "Maybe now, I'm ready to find it again." The next day, the world reacted. Some praised him. Some mocked him. Some accused him of orchestrating the entire thing for publicity. But no one ignored him, because he wasn't selling anything. He wasn't launching a product. He was telling a story, his story, and in it, he wasn't the hero. He was the one who forgot. And the girl who remembered saved him. Inside the Voss Tower, the boardroom was on fire. "Our stocks dropped 6%, snapped Leon Bryant, head of global investment. "This remember stunt wasn't a stunt," Dominic interrupted. Claudia stood silently by the wall, unreadable. "You're telling me you just gave away $10 million to a homeless shelter overnight?" "No," Dominic said. "I gave it to my mother." The room froze. He stood, walked to the window. "Because I can't bury her twice." No one spoke after that. Except Claudia. She cleared her throat. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" Claudia stepped aside. And in walked someone Dominic never thought he'd see again. Robert. His younger brother, estranged. Last seen 16 years ago after a lawsuit and a family split that left scars across Thanksgiving tables and inheritance papers. Heard. "You finally took a punch," Robert said. Dominic exhaled a soft laugh. "I did. Good, maybe now we can talk. They did, for hours. About their father, their childhood, Rosa, the good parts and the wounds they never named. And by the time they finished, something else happened. Dominic picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 7 years. When the line picked up, the voice on the other end sounded tired but kind. "Hello, this is Dominic Voss," he said. "You don't know me, but your shelter saved my mother once. And now I'd like to return the favor." A pause. "How much?" "Not money," Dominic said. "I want to build you a home, a real one. For every family who was told they were a burden. For every mother who held her kid's hand in the cold. I want them to have a door they never have to leave again." Meanwhile, Mia sat on the rooftop of her shelter with her grandmother. The city glowed below, but she wasn't looking at that dot. She was holding something. A handwritten note from Dominic. No lawyers, no envelope. Just a folded page that read, "You reminded me that remembering is more than thinking about the past. It's honoring it. I don't know how to be the man your mother believed in, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." Below the note, in a separate line, "P.S. Would you like to help me build something together? Something with your name on it." Mia smiled, not because of the offer, but because he signed it. "With gratitude, your lion." And for the first time since her mother passed, Mia looked at the sky and whispered, "I think he's ready, Mama." The wind didn't answer, but somehow it didn't need to. The marble floors of the Voss Tower lobby reflected more than just chandeliers that morning. They reflected change, not the superficial kind you slap onto headlines or paste across donation banners. The deep kind, the kind that starts in the marrow. Dominic Voss stepped into the lobby not as a symbol, not as a mogul, not as the man who had silenced rooms with ambition, but as a student, and his teacher was a 9-year-old girl who had spoken one word that split him open. Remember. In the week since Mia had stood beneath the spotlight and shattered his armor with a whisper, the world had watched his transformation with breathless eyes. Some still called it a stunt. Others called it repentance. But most didn't know what to call it, because redemption, real redemption, wasn't something they were used to seeing in public. But Dominic didn't care what they called it. He was building, now. Really building. Not companies, not apps, not infrastructures that sat behind passwords and PAYWALL. He was building memory. The Rosa Foundation had already broken ground on 3 city blocks across Queens and Brooklyn. Old buildings bought, cleared, restructured. Every floor designed not just for shelter, but for dignity. Reading corners, therapy wings, legal support, rooms. A rooftop garden with a wall where residents could paint the names of people they'd lost, but would never let the world forget. On the highest floor of the main center, there was a glass room. A meeting space, barely furnished, except for one object. A chair. Simple. Wooden. Beside it, a plaque, for the ones who stayed behind when no one asked them to. R.J.V. Rosa Vivien Voss. He had given her his name, not as a token, as a truth. And yet, beneath all the new beginnings, a storm gathered. A whisper campaign. Investors pulling out. A leaked internal memo questioning Dominic's mental stability. His act of humanity, of becoming small for the first time in his life, was not welcome in a world built on dominance. They wanted the titan back. Not the man. And when Dominic walked into the executive boardroom that morning, the truth met him at the door like a slap. The vote. They were voting him out. Dominic. Leon Bryant said from the head of the table, voice carefully neutral. "You've changed, and we don't mean that as a compliment." Dominic stood tall, not angry, not wounded. Ready. Double quotes. "Good," he said. Leon blinked. "Good? If I hadn't changed, I'd still be the man who let a child grow up without a father, because I thought profit was more important than people." Uneasy glances rippled around the table. "So yes, Dominic continued, I've changed. And if that means stepping down from a company I built with my bones and blood, then fine. Because for the first time in my life, I'm building something that matters without a price tag attached. Leon laughed under his breath. What are you going to do, Dominic? Play house with your daughter? Open soup kitchens and write poetry? You're not built for that. Dominic walked to the window and looked out at the city. Then he said the words that shook the room harder than any billion-dollar announcement in company history. I'm not built for it. I'm rebuilt for it. They voted 16-5, Dominic. Voss was removed as CEO of Voss Industries. He walked out of the boardroom to applause from no one, except Claudia, who stood at the elevator and nodded. You're more dangerous now, she said. Why? Because you're no longer hiding behind empire. You've stepped out with your heart showing. He smiled faintly. That used to be a weakness. Now it's your weapon. That afternoon, Mia stood outside a bookstore with her grandmother, nose pressed to the glass. Inside, a stack of new releases sat beneath a hand-lettered sign. Advance copies. The Girl Who Remembered. She looked up as a shadow crossed behind her. Dominic. Not in a suit, in a hoodie and sneakers. You wrote it? She asked. No. He said, you did. I just held the pen. Mia opened the first page. Inside, she saw her mother's name, not once. Not as a footnote. But across the dedication. To Rosa, who built a man from the pieces of a boy, then left the light on for him to find his way home. Mia smiled. But before she could speak, the bookstore door opened. A woman with tears in her eyes stepped out holding the book. My daughter. She's in foster care, the woman whispered. I haven't seen her in 2 years. But your story, her story, gave me the strength to try again. Dominic said nothing. He just placed a hand gently on the woman's shoulder. Then go, Mia said softly. Go remember her out loud. And so she did, that night. Dominic Voss stood on the rooftop of the Rosa Foundation's first shelter, surrounded by families eating dinner under string lights, laughter echoing through the air. He turned to Mia. You know they'll still talk, right? He said. Let them. They'll say I lost everything. But I found something, she replied. What? Mia looked out over the city. Someone worth becoming. And for the first time in Dominic Voss's life, he didn't need to build anything else to feel whole. The storm came at midnight. Not the kind that rattles windows or drowns streets, but the kind made of headlines, lawsuits, betrayal, and old secrets clawing their way back into the light. For 9 days, Dominic Voss had been rebuilding his name from ash and memory. The Rosa Foundation had already helped 4 families move from sleeping bags to beds. Mia had spoken at 2 schools. Even strangers sent letters thanking him for what he said at the shelter steps. But then the storm came, and it didn't knock. It exploded. It started with a whistleblower. An anonymous email blasted to every major news outlet in the country. Dominic Voss hid the truth about Rosa Josephine for decades. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She wasn't just a woman who raised him. She was his mother. The email included scanned medical documents, a hospital record showing Rosa listed as next of kin when Dominic was admitted for pneumonia at age 12. A child welfare form signed by Rosa Josephine under legal guardian. An old letter unopened, found by a reporter where she referred to Dominic as my son, always. And just like that, the narrative shattered. Overnight, the headlines changed. Did Dominic Voss lie about his past? The real reason behind the Remember stunt was the billionaire hiding his mother's identity to protect his fortune. The world that once wept now pointed fingers. The girl who inspired a movement became a trending hashtag wrapped in skepticism. Staged. Hashtag fake foundations. Hashtag orphan sellout. Inside the Rosa Foundation's headquarters, Dominic stood at the window in silence. The rain outside had started for real, now hammering the glass in sheets. Behind him, staff members whispered in corners. Emails pinged like heartbeats. Lawyers called. Board members panicked. "We can fight this," Claudia said quietly, standing behind him. "Can we?" Dominic replied without turning. "You didn't lie," she said. "I didn't tell the truth either," he whispered. "I was raised by Rosa." Everyone knew that, but no one knew the full story. "Because I didn't let them." He turned around. His eyes were heavier now, not with defeat but with grief. "I was ashamed," he said. "Not of her, of myself. Dominic. I told myself if people thought she was just a housekeeper, it would protect her. Protect me, but really? I was scared that if they knew the truth, they'd see where I really came from." He looked at the wall where Rosa's photo hung in a golden frame. "They'd know I didn't build myself. She built me. And I was afraid they'd take that away from me." Claudia said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Some truths don't require defense. Only confession. Downstairs, Mia was sitting in the children's reading room, flipping through a book she'd read a dozen times. When Dominic entered, she didn't look up. "You're mad," he said. She closed the book. "No, I'm sad." He sat beside her. "Because they're saying it was all fake?" She shook her head. "Because it might have been real. And you were too scared to tell me." He looked down. Her voice was small, but sharp. "Why didn't you tell me she was your mom?" Dominic swallowed hard. "Because I didn't think I deserved to be her son anymore." Mia didn't speak for a long time. And then without warning, she pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket. "I was saving this." "What is it?" "A letter. The last one she wrote me before she got sick. She told me not to read it until I found you." She handed it to him. "I haven't opened it yet," she said. His hands shook as he slid his finger beneath the flap. Inside, a single page, faded ink. Rosa's handwriting, "To Mia, my brightest star. If you find him, and if he doesn't tell you who I was, don't be angry. He's not hiding me to forget. He's hiding me to survive. He thinks the world only loves the man who came from nothing. But one day, he'll realize he came from everything." The paper slipped from his hands. "She knew," he whispered. "She always did," Mia replied. "And she forgave me. Even before I asked." Mia nodded. "She forgave you. But what you do next decides if the world does." The next morning, Dominic called a press conference. This time, there were no stage lights, no orchestrated backdrops, no designer suits. Just a man in front of microphones, with his hands folded, his voice steady. And his past fully revealed. "You've heard the rumors," he said, "so let me confirm them. Rosa Josephine was not just the woman who raised me." He looked directly into the camera. "She was my mother." Gasps. Camera shudders. Reporters leaning forward like wolves catching scent. "I never called her that in public. I never thanked her on any stage. I buried her truth so deep I almost forgot it myself." He paused. But his voice did not shake. "So I say it now to Pooh. The world, not to clear my name, but to honor hers." He held up the photograph. "A boy. And a woman. Him and Rosa. This is the woman who raised me. Who fed me. Who protected me. Who taught me how to love when no one else did. And if you think that makes me less of a man, less of a builder, less of a success," he stared straight into the lens, "then you've forgotten what really gives a person value. It's not their origin, it's their memory." And with that, he stepped back, not down. But forward. And across the world, hearts broke open again, not for the myth of Dominic Voss. But for the man who had finally remembered. The one person who made him real. The sun broke through the clouds like it had been waiting for the right moment. For days, the city had been soaked in doubt newspapers printed in black and blood. Networks slicing the same headlines with different knives. Billionaires buried. Secret. The housekeeper was his mother. Can memory fix what ambition broke? But on the 10th day since Mia's words silenced the world, the wind changed. Not because people suddenly forgave Dominic Voss. Not because the internet decided he was good again. But because something real, undeniably real, was happening. Right there on the corner of 7th and Ashfield, they were opening the doors. The first Rosa Foundation. Home. A building made not of marble and ego, but of steel and second chances. The ceremony wasn't grand. There were no gold-plated scissors or celebrity speeches. Just people. A line of families waiting to come in. A young mother with 2 children holding her pant legs like lifelines. A grandfather in a wheelchair. A teenage girl wearing the same coat Mia once wore. And at the front of it all, standing behind a wooden podium set under a white cloth awning, was Dominic Voss. No title, no suit, just a man holding a piece of paper with smudged ink and the weight of a life. Finally told, he looked out at the crowd. Then down at the page, and back up again. He folded it. Didn single quotes to need it. I used to think legacy was about what you build that outlives you, he began. I spent most of my life building towers that scratched the sky. But the higher I climbed, the smaller I became. Murmurs in the crowd. Dominic continued, eyes steady, voice louder now. And then one day, a girl stood in front of me with nothing in her pockets but a word. A single word that made every building I ever built feel hollow. He turned, gestured to the building behind him. But this is not hollow. Cheers began softly. A woman clapped, wiping tears. This is a home for those the world forgets. For the families too tired to keep running. For the mothers who give everything and ask for nothing. This is for the ones who remember. He paused. Then stepped aside. But I'm not the one who should cut the ribbon. The crowd turned. And there she was. Mia. Wearing a new green dress, not because it was fancy, but because it matched the color her mother used to say looked like spring. She walked up with quiet steps. Carrying in her hand the scissors they used at the shelter food pantry. Plastic handles, old, scratched. She didn't speak to the cameras. She didn't wave. She simply looked at the ribbon. And whispered, "For Mama." Snip. The crowd erupted. But not in noise. In stillness. A stillness that stretched through every heart watching. That night, videos of the moment flooded the internet. Hashtags flipped from rage to reverence. Hashtag remember, hashtag for Rosa, hashtag legacy built on love. And behind the scenes, Dominic walked through the halls with Mia beside him. He saw the library where books had already begun to pile. The playroom. The kitchen. The quiet spaces designed for silence without loneliness. They stopped in one room. The last on the top floor. A nursery. Painted in soft creams and blues. There was a rocking chair in the corner, and beside it, a plaque, Rosa's room. For the ones who need a place to begin again. Dominic stepped inside and sat. He didn't speak, but Mia did. Do you know what she told me the night before she passed? He shook his head. Mia's eyes shimmered. She said, "People will forget what you did. They'll forget what you said. But they'll never forget how you made them feel. So make people feel like home." Dominic swallowed hard. "And that's what this place is now," she whispered. "You didn't build a shelter. You built a home." He nodded. "For the first time," he said, voice thick. "I finally understand what she meant." Then, a soft knock at the door. A staff member poked her head in. "Mr. Voss," she said, "there's someone you should meet." Dominic and Mia followed her to the entrance, where a young woman stood holding a baby. "This is Sophia," the woman said. "My daughter. We were on the list for months. I just wanted to say." She looked at them both. "Thank you for remembering people like me," Mia smiled. Dominic did too. But then Sophia stepped closer and whispered something that froze him. Still, my mother knew Rosa. They were in the same shelter once. She said Rosa helped deliver me in a church basement during a blackout. She saved my life. Dominic blinked. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done. Rosa's legacy wasn't just in him or in me. It was everywhere. Hidden in lives that didn't make headlines, but built the world. That night, Dominic stood on the rooftop again, this time, not to wonder, but to witness. The lights of the Rosa home burned soft and steady. No cold glass, no sterile luxury. Just people, living. Laughing. Breathing. He felt Mia's presence before she even spoke. "They'll write stories about you now," she said behind him. He chuckled. "Let them. They'll ask what changed you." He turned. "What should I say?" Mia tilted her head. "Say it wasn't you who changed." He raised an eyebrow. "Say you just remembered who you were meant to be." And for once, he had nothing to add, because there was nothing left to prove, only something left to protect, something more powerful than legacy to remember, to love, to build homes that never forget the hearts that built them. Beginning with one word, and one little girl who didn't flinch, who didn't beg, who didn't break. She just reminded the world what really matters, and the world, finally, listened.